In the world of NASCAR, few names spark more debate or admiration than Smokey Yunick. He wasn't just a mechanic. He wasn't just a team owner. Smokey was an engineer, a thinker, and above all, a rule bender who treated the NASCAR rulebook like a checklist of what wasn't covered. Born in the backwoods of Pennsylvania and hardened in the skies over Europe as a World War II bomber pilot, Smokey Yunick came back to the U.S. with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. He opened Smokey's Best Damn Garage in town in Daytona Beach, and from there launched a legacy of innovation that would haunt NASCAR officials for decades. He became famous not just for building fast cars, but for building smarter cars. His machines didn't just win, they confused tech inspectors. He ran cars with invisible mods, fuel tanks disguised as roll cages, offset bodies that turned tighter, and fuel lines that held more gas than the tank itself. He once said, "If NASCAR didn't say you couldn't do it, then you could." It wasn't cheating to Smokey, it was outsmarting. But while most people remember Smokey for his tricks, few talk about what happened in 1963 when he played it straight. No hacks, no hidden tech, just raw engineering. General Motors handed him an engine so advanced it could have rewritten history. It was legal, it was clean, and it was dangerous, but not because it broke the rules, because it didn't. That engine was called the Mystery Motor. Smokey Yunick was ready to drop it into a Chevy, roll it onto Daytona's high banks, and prove once and for all that genius didn't need gimmicks. But NASCAR didn't just stop him, they banned the motor before it ever saw a starting flag. Why? Because even Smokey's legal innovations were too much for the system to handle. And that's where our story begins. Not with a cheat, but with a machine so powerful it scared the sport's gatekeepers to death. In the early 1960s, Chevrolet wasn't just competing in NASCAR, they were quietly plotting domination. Deep inside their engineering departments, a revolutionary engine was taking shape. It wasn't like anything that had come before. It was big, it was powerful, and it had a nickname that felt straight out of a Cold War thriller, the Mystery Motor. Technically, it was a 427 cubic inch V8, an early version of what would become the Mark II big block. But it wasn't just the size that mattered. This thing was designed from the ground up with racing in mind. Larger valves, a more efficient combustion chamber, lightweight internals. It was capable of higher RPMs, cooler operating temps, and output numbers that made every other car on the track look like a go-kart. Chevrolet didn't publicize it. In fact, the goal was secrecy. The engine was developed under wraps, with a small circle of trusted engineers and performance specialists. And when they needed someone to test it, someone who could push it to its limits without tipping off the competition, they turned to one man, Smokey Yunick. This wasn't a typical Smokey build. There were no hidden compartments, no gray area tricks, just raw horsepower and brilliant engineering. Smokey's job was to test it, refine it, and make it race-ready. Because when it hit the track, the Mystery Motor wouldn't just compete. It was supposed to obliterate the field. And make no mistake, the Mystery Motor was 100% legal under NASCAR's 1963 rulebook. It met the displacement limit. It fit inside a Chevrolet chassis. It had no banned materials or components. But what it did have? Potential. The kind that made officials nervous long before the engine even turned over. Chevrolet had built a monster. Smokey was ready to unleash it. But the sport wasn't. Chevrolet may have engineered the Mystery Motor, but in the racing world, the motor was only as good as the man tuning it. And that man was Smokey Yunick. Tucked inside his legendary Best Damn Garage in town on Beach Street in Daytona, Smokey set to work. The mystery motor was shipped in under absolute secrecy. No press, no fanfare, just a nondescript crate carrying a power plant that could change NASCAR forever. It was the most advanced piece of equipment he'd ever been given. No gimmicks, no rule dodging, just a clean slate big block designed to crush the competition with sheer force. Smokey loved it. Not just because it was powerful, but because it played directly into his strengths. He was a thinker, a problem solver, and for once, he didn't have to hide his genius. He got to amplify it. He went over every component, tweaked the heads, tuned the carburation, fine-tuned the ignition curve until the dyno numbers made his own jaw drop. He knew instantly. This engine wasn't just good, it was historic. But Smokey wasn't just building a race car. He was building a message. One that said, you don't need to cheat when you're this far ahead. And in his mind, this was his chance to silence the critics. The engine was legal, the build was clean, and the result would be undeniable. When he rolled that car toward Daytona for testing, Smokey wasn't looking to pick a fight. He was looking to make a statement. That sometimes the scariest thing in racing isn't a rule breaker. It's someone who doesn't need to break the rules to win. And that terrified NASCAR more than any cheat he'd ever pulled. It wasn't a race day. There were no grandstands packed with fans, just early morning sun, cold concrete, and the echo of hammers in pit lane. Daytona testing had begun, and Smokey Yunick was there, rolling out a car no one recognized, powered by an engine no one had seen. When he fired it up, heads turned. Not just because it was loud, but because it sounded different, smoother, meaner, like the thing was barely trying. Rival crew chiefs walked over pretending to chat, but everyone was really listening, and what they heard scared them. That day, Smokey didn't even push the motor to the edge. He didn't need to. The car clocked speeds faster than most of the field, and it did it effortlessly. Some said it ran cooler and more consistently than any Chevy they'd ever seen. Smokey just smiled. It wasn't long before NASCAR inspectors showed up. They combed through the car, expecting the usual Smokey tricks. Hidden tanks, modified roll cages. But this time, they found nothing. Every bolt checked out. Every spec was legal. Still, something felt wrong. To the other teams, this wasn't just a fast car. It was an unfair advantage they couldn't explain. Because Smokey hadn't cheated. He'd just outbuilt them. One rival team owner reportedly muttered, "If this thing races on Sunday, it's game over." They weren't worried about losing a race. They were worried about being embarrassed. NASCAR had a decision to make. The mystery motor didn't violate the rules, but it violated the balance of the sport. And in the world of stock car racing, domination wasn't just a performance issue. It was a business problem. And so, even before the checkered flag ever waved, whispers began, "We've got to shut this thing down." The moment Smokey Yunick's car hit the track, it wasn't just the fans or the press who noticed. It was the paddock. Other teams immediately sensed something was off. Not in a shady way. There was nothing obviously illegal about the car. It didn't stink of fuel. It wasn't sitting too low. But it was fast. Too fast. Whispers turned to worried stares. Crew chiefs and engineers from rival teams walked past Smokey's pit like they were trying to peek into Area 51. The numbers coming from his lap times didn't make sense. The RPMs, the throttle response, the way the car handled down the straights, it was surgical. The mystery motor wasn't just powerful, it was refined. That scared people more than any trick Smokey had ever pulled. Even NASCAR officials were uneasy. One inspector later admitted, "We knew something was coming, but we didn't know it would look like that. The rulebook didn't ban what Smokey had done, because no one had imagined it yet. And that was the issue. Smokey Yunick hadn't found a loophole this time. He'd found the next chapter of NASCAR performance, one that would leave everyone else in the dust. Teams started complaining, not officially, but through back channels, quiet meetings, hallway conversations. If the mystery motor ran on Sunday, they argued, Chevrolet would own the podium. The balance of the sport, the showmanship, the suspense would vanish. NASCAR feared the same. It wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about optics, about keeping races competitive, sponsors happy, and viewers engaged. And Smokey? He could feel it happening. He'd done everything right, played it clean. And yet, he saw the storm brewing. Not because he'd cheated, but because he dared to bring something too good to the table. Smokey Yunick woke up the next morning ready to turn heads in testing again. But instead, he found a surprise waiting for him. NASCAR had issued a last-minute technical bulletin, a hastily typed addendum to the rulebook that disqualified the mystery motor on the grounds of unapproved configuration. To the public, it was vague. To Smokey, it was a dagger. He wasn't banned for breaking a rule. He was banned for building something NASCAR wasn't ready for. There was no appeal, no hearing, just a quiet no thanks from the sanctioning body. The order? Pack it up. You won't be racing this engine. Smokey was furious. He hadn't used any gimmicks this time. No hidden tanks, no magnetic fuel lines. He'd finally played by the rules, built the best engine in the field, and still got sidelined. He confronted officials, demanded explanations. All he got were polite shrugs. The decision had come from the top. It wasn't about legality anymore. It was about damage control. NASCAR couldn't afford a car so dominant it made the rest of the field look obsolete. The optics of a total blowout would have been a PR disaster. So they killed the monster before it had a chance to roar. Smokey later said in an interview, "They couldn't beat me fair, so they changed the rules." That wasn't paranoia. That was reality. The truth was simple. He was too far ahead. NASCAR didn't want a future they couldn't control. The mystery motor went back into the crate, but what it represented, that didn't go quietly. It was a reminder that even in racing, sometimes the biggest threat isn't a cheater, it's an innovator. If Smokey was angry, Chevrolet was livid. They had spent millions quietly developing the mystery motor. Engineers had burned through sleepless nights crafting a powerhouse that would change the game. And now, after a few laps in testing and a wave of nervous glances from the paddock, NASCAR had effectively killed the project. For Chevrolet, this wasn't just a technical setback. It was a strategic embarrassment. They'd followed the rules, created something revolutionary, and were told to sit down because the other teams weren't ready. Executives debated pulling back from NASCAR altogether. Smokey, ever the maverick, didn't hold back. He wrote blistering letters, called out the hypocrisy in press interviews, said what no one else dared to say. If you build something smarter, lighter, better, and they still won't let you run it, what's the point of having a rulebook? Internally, GM knew the motor couldn't die, so they pivoted. They took what they'd learned from the mystery motor and began adapting it for broader use. The result? The 427 big block that would go on to dominate racing in the mid and late 60s, in drag strips, on road courses, and even back in NASCAR. But Smokey's name, erased. The man who helped shape it got no credit, no invitation, no handshake. That stung more than the ban itself. To Smokey Yunick, the whole affair proved a painful truth. Racing isn't always about building the best car. Sometimes It's about building the most acceptable car, the most convenient narrative. And in 1963, Smokey's narrative didn't fit. He wasn't the hero NASCAR wanted. He was the genius they feared. To this day, racing fans, historians, and former crew chiefs still argue one question. Was NASCAR right to ban the mystery motor? On paper, the answer leans toward no. The engine followed the rulebook. Displacement, legal, configuration, within boundaries. Smokey Yunick didn't sneak in a loophole. There were no hidden tanks or magnetic pickups. It was just a motor, a very good one. But NASCAR never claimed he cheated. They didn't even allege a violation. Instead, they created a new rule after the fact to disqualify it. The justification? Unapproved configuration. But that term was vague. It didn't name a single part or dimension. It was, at best, a safety net for NASCAR's authority. To some, it was the ultimate betrayal of the spirit of innovation. Smokey had won, but off the track. He'd done what racers are supposed to do: build faster, smarter, better. And instead of being rewarded, he got shut down. To others, especially inside the NASCAR ecosystem, it was about maintaining balance. If Smokey's engine had raced and crushed the competition, it could have driven fans away. NASCAR was built on rivalries, underdogs, and unpredictability. If one team, Chevy and Smokey, became too dominant, in most sports, we celebrate genius. We build statues of game changers. But in racing, sometimes we silence them. Smokey Yunick represented a threat not just to his competitors, but to the status quo. And NASCAR? It blinked. Instead of letting the best machine win, it drew a line in the sand and changed the rules once a man like Smokey got too close to crossing it. Fair? Maybe not. But it was definitely fear. So what if NASCAR had allowed the mystery motor to race? Ask anyone who worked in or around the paddock in 1963, and you'll hear the same thing. It would have rewritten the record books. The numbers coming from Smokey's tests were stunning. The engine ran cooler. It revved higher. It delivered horsepower NASCAR hadn't yet seen in competition. And it did it without stressing the chassis or needing exotic fuels. According to crew members who witnessed the tests, the car was in a league of its own. Smokey reportedly said, "We could have lapped the damn field." That wasn't bragging. That was cold, calculated math. If it had entered the Daytona 500, the mystery motor could have marked the beginning of a Chevrolet dynasty. Instead, it was locked away. The engine disappeared from public view. What survived were copies, versions of the design that went on to power legendary muscle cars like the Corvette, the Camaro ZL1, and Chevelle that ruled the drag strip. But none of them were the mystery motor. That specific piece of innovation, the one born in secret and tuned by the most dangerous mind in racing, never had its day. It's the ultimate what-if in motorsports history. A moment that could have shifted the power dynamic in NASCAR forever. But instead of roaring across the finish line, the mystery motor became a cautionary tale. Not about cheating, but about being too good. And in a sport that claims to reward speed, power, and innovation, Smokey Yunick's engine proved there was still one thing faster than horsepower: fear. In the end, NASCAR didn't just sideline a single engine. They erased a moment in history, a moment where the sport could have evolved, where the future had already arrived under the hood of one car in Daytona Beach. But the story of the mystery motor isn't just about lost potential. It's about legacy, about a man who refused to play by anyone's rules but still managed to change the game. Even when he played it straight, Smokey Yunick was seen as a threat, not because he cheated, but because he thought better, faster, and further ahead than everyone else. And that made him dangerous. The motor never raced, but its DNA lives on. The architecture of that engine influenced decades of Chevrolet design. The very same 427 block that was born from the ashes of the mystery motor would dominate drag racing, street racing, and even Pro Stock Series long after NASCAR shut it down. Smokey, for his part, never forgave them. He continued to tinker, to invent, and to write about the sport he loved and resented in equal measure. He remained a legend, not just because of what he built, but because of what he represented. Freedom, rebellion, genius that couldn't be boxed in. The mystery motor may have been banned, but it wasn't forgotten. Because sometimes the greatest legacy isn't a trophy. It's a question that still echoes through garages and racetracks to this day. What if they had let